and the doctor were justified in their choice by the life and principles of the young man, as far as any father can be justified in choosing such a profession for his son, and as far as any lay impropriator can be justified in making such a promise. Had Lady Lufton had a second son, that second son would probably have had the living, and no one would have thought it wrong. Certainly not if that second son had been such a one as Mark Robarts. Lady Lufton herself was a woman who thought much on religious matters, and would by no means have been disposed to place anyone in a living merely because such a one had been her son's friend. Her tendencies were high church, and she was enabled to perceive that those of young Mark Robarts ran in the same direction. She was very desirous that her son should make an associate of his clergyman, and by this step she would ensure at any rate that. She was anxious that the parish vicar should be one with whom she could herself fully cooperate, and was perhaps unconsciously wishful that he might in some measure be subject to her influence. Should she appoint an elder man, this might probably not be the case to the same extent, and should her son have the gift, it might probably not be the case at all. And therefore it was resolved that the living should be given to young Robarts. He took his degree, not with any brilliancy, but quite in the manner that his father desired. He then travelled for 8 or 10 months with Lord Lufton and a college don, and almost immediately after his return home was ordained. The living of Framley is in the diocese of Barchester, and, seeing what were Mark's hopes with reference to that diocese, it was by no means difficult to get him a curacy within it. But this curacy he was not allowed long to fill. He had not been in it above a 12-month when poor old Dr. Stopford, the then vicar of Framley, was gathered to his fathers, and the full fruition of his rich hopes fell upon his shoulders. But even yet more must be told of his good fortune before we can come to the actual incidents of our story. Lady Lufton, who, as I have said, thought much of clerical matters, did not carry her high church principles so far as to advocate celibacy for the clergy. On the contrary, she had an idea that a man could not be a good parish parson without a wife. So, having given to her favourite a position in the world and an income sufficient for a gentleman's wants, she set herself to work to find him a partner in those blessings. And here also, as in other matters, he fell in with the views of his patroness. Not, however, that they were declared to him in that marked manner in which the affair of the living had been broached. Lady Lufton was much too highly gifted with woman's craft for that. She never told the young vicar that Miss Monsell accompanied her ladyship's married daughter to Framley Court, expressly that he, Mark, might fall in love with her. But such was in truth the case. Lady Lufton had but 2 children. The eldest, a daughter, had been married some 4 or 5 years to Sir George Meredith, and this Miss Monsell was a dear friend of hers. And now looms before me the novelist's great difficulty. Miss Monsell, or rather Mrs. Mark Robarts, must be described. As Miss Monsell, our tale will have to take no prolonged note of her, and yet we will call her Fanny Monsell when we declare that she was one of the pleasantest companions that could be brought near to a man as the future partner of his home and owner of his heart. And if high principles without asperity, female gentleness without weakness, a love of laughter without malice, and a true loving heart can qualify a woman to be a parson's wife, then was Fanny Monsell qualified to fill that station. In person she was somewhat larger than common. Her face would have been beautiful, but that her mouth was large. Her hair, which was copious, was of a bright brown. Her eyes also were brown, and being so, were the distinctive feature of her face, for brown eyes are not common. They were liquid, large, and full either of tenderness or of mirth. Mark Robarts still had his accustomed luck when such a girl as this was brought to Framley for his wooing, and he did woo her, and won her, for Mark himself was a handsome fellow. At this time the vicar was about 25 years of age, and the future Mrs. Robarts was 2 or 3 years younger. Nor did she come quite empty-handed to the vicarage. It cannot be said that Fanny Monsell was an heiress, but she had been left with a provision of some few £1,000s. This was so settled that the interest of his wife's money paid the heavy insurance on his life which young Robarts effected, and there was left to him, over and above, sufficient to furnish his parsonage in the very best style of clerical comfort, and to start him on the road of life rejoicing. So much.